Welcome to Transformative Principle, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to Transformative Principle. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on all the social networks at Jethro Jones. The Transformative Principle podcast is a proud member of the B Podcast Network. We're so excited about all the great shows that we have for educators in whatever your role. We would love to have you listen to any of the shows that we've got. If you don't have a show, why don't you let me know and I'll help you create one that's just for your place. So today on the show, I have Dr. Gene Tavernetti. He's been involved in education for over 40 years. He has served as a coach, teacher, counselor, administrator, and consultant. He's the author of 2 books, Teach Fast, a book about the design and delivery of quality instruction, and Maximizing the Impact of Coaching Cycles, a book that answers many of the questions that were left unanswered in most books on instructional coaching. In 2006, Gene partnered with his former high school teacher and mentor, Dr. Randy Olson, to found Total Educational Systems Support, and you can find their website at testcg.com. The focus of TESS has always been training teachers and those who support teachers in how to provide the best instruction possible. And this is what I really like about Gene. He holds a core belief about children and adults. Given the right environment and proper support, everyone can improve and succeed. And that is evident in how he talks about people, how he coaches them, and how he speaks. Gene, welcome to Transformative Principle. So great to have you here.
Thank you, Jethro.
So what's most valuable to you from our conversation today?
Well, I think the overall theme of everything that we talked about is respecting teachers, respecting their experience, respecting their experiences of what they go through every day with having to plan a lesson, having to deliver a lesson to possibly 30 kids who may or may not be interested that day. And you need to respect that. You need to respect that because nobody is perfect and teachers don't have to be perfect. So just respect what they do and respect their time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so key. My big takeaway from today is when we talk about a personal versus a professional relationship and how those are different and what that looks like. You gave me some food for thought on that, and I appreciate that. Now, Gene, you also have a new podcast that you are launching that is called Better Teaching. And tell us about that and what your thoughts are on why you're doing that and why that's so important right now.
Well, I think that first of all, better teaching, only stuff
That's
that
right.
works.
Better teaching.
Only stuff that works because I just think, I started listening to podcasts and then I only have so much time to listen to podcasts. And so I would hear they were entertaining, but they didn't help me as an educator. I want something actionable. I want to make a commitment that if you listen to my podcast, you are going to laugh at least once and you are going to have at least one actionable item, something that you can do. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like, for example, when we talked about when you're observing a lesson, smile.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could start that right now.
There you go. There's your first, only stuff that works. Start smiling. That's great. Well, Gene, that podcast is going to be awesome. People are going to love it. It's called Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works. You can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just search for Better Teaching, search for Gene Tavernetti. You'll find it. And you can, of course, go to his website at testcg.com, and it's right there up in the main bar. So we're going to get to my interview with Gene here in just a moment. Gene, tell us about why coaching is important for teachers, first of all.
I think everybody can be better. That's number one. Everybody can improve. I know it's cliche, but the best of the best in the world, in anything, in any endeavor, have somebody who's coaching them. And so I think that's important for the individual. But I also think it's important for the organization that the best get coached, and then it's okay for the rest of them. That's one of the things we found when we worked in schools. I mean that in a staff, there are people who are viewed And it doesn't matter which school you go to. There are people who are viewed as the real pros. They've been doing it a long time, or even if they haven't been doing it a long time, they're really good.
Yeah.
And there are also people who are pretty good, but a little bit hesitant, don't have the confidence to have somebody come in and talk to them because you are being vulnerable. But if the best says, I have a coach, I've worked with this guy, it was worth the time, then it's going to be easier for everybody else to say, yeah, I'm going to step up and see what this is like.
I think that's a really important distinction for people to hear, that the way that I say it is that it's not just that they have a coach that is specifically designated as a coach, but they're always looking for ways to get better and learn and grow and develop. And when you create a formalized relationship with a coach where that is their role, that changes things. So I think great teachers, great principals are always looking to get better, but the ones who really excel at that are the ones who go looking for a coach, find a coach, and use that coach on a regular basis. How would you say the difference is between those two, of just looking for ways to get better and actually engaging with a coach?
Well, I think that if there's somebody designated to be a coach on staff, they should have some skills. They should have something to offer. And one of the things that I say principals should say is that we have a coach. I want everybody to meet with the coach, or even stronger than that. Everybody's going to meet with the coach,
Mm-hmm.
because it may be that the person who just wants to get better doesn't need a formal, I think that's the word you use, coaching relationship. You have a conversation, and it may be that the coach during this conversation may be able to connect them with somebody, or there's other ways to help when you get to that level. And when I say to that level, and that's the level of expertise where somebody is tweaking things. And so I think it's critical before the coach works with anybody is that they know the level of expertise of the person to whom they're talking.
Yeah. So, what does that mean? Talk about that a little more.
Well, that means I think one of the biggest mistakes that coaches make when they begin to work with staff is they have an agenda, and they should have an agenda. There should be some established way in the school that this is how we do things at this site. And that's usually what that thing is, or how they do things at that site is usually determined by in some sort of collaborative way, looking at data and saying, this is what we need to do. These are some things that we need to do. And there are some decisions made in whatever group process that is made. And usually there are different levels of those things being implemented already. In education, there's nothing brand new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's nothing brand new. So if you go into classrooms and we've established this year that we want kids to talk to each other more. We're going to emphasize oral communication during instruction, during the entire day. And if I go into Jethro's class for the first time to meet with him as a coach, and I start saying, oh, Jethro, here are all the ways you could do this. You could do this, you could do that. Whereas if I had only taken the time to drop in a few times to observe what Jethro does and thinking, he's not only doing this, he's exceeding what the expectations are. So I think a big mistake is that coaches have is not knowing the teachers in the classroom before they provide any feedback at all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We had one of the schools I was assistant principal at. We had a process where we were checking on maximizing opportunities to respond, and so all of our observations were about how many opportunities do the kids have to respond. And in that approach, it was worthwhile and beneficial for us to do that. But if we went in and, like you said, just said, here's how you can help kids increase opportunities to respond without knowing what they were doing already came across as condescending. They thought that we didn't know who they
Yes.
were, we didn't care about what they were doing already, and that we were just preaching to them what they should be doing rather than working with them to improve their practice. And telling people what they should do versus working with them to improve their practice are two different things. How do you deal with that in your coaching?
Well, I make a distinction when I talk to coaches, when I'm training coaches, I draw a distinction between personal relationships and professional relationships. And of all, it's just stipulated. Relationships are important. You have to have a relationship with people. But here's one of the ways in which I differ from a lot of people who talk about coaching and developing relationships. In fact, I do a presentation called Developing Relationships Without Serving Chocolate,
Huh.
because a lot of the advice is about developing personal relationships. But the metaphor that I use is with a doctor. And if I ask somebody, do you like your doctor? And they would say, if it's affirmative, if they do like their doctor, I'd say, why? Well, because, she always listens to what I have to say. She always takes the time. She knows who I am before she says anything. And so that's, to me, that's the professional relationship that I think coaches want to develop. Do you need to be a nice person? Do you need to be a decent person and have other relationships? Yes. But a teacher doesn't care, that you brought chocolate to the meeting if you go in and do what we just discussed a minute ago. Just come in and start telling them what they need to do without knowing who they are as a teacher. And so making that distinction between developing that personal relationship and a professional relationship. Because most of the time in coaching, when I'm coaching teachers, and you know this, I mean, you go in and you see a brand new teacher and you walk out and you say, that person's a teacher. They have a lot of things to learn, but that person's a teacher. And then you're going to talk to that person differently than someone who's you're wondering what in the world
Yeah.
ever got them to this place. So it is that knowing them professionally, they're going to appreciate the advice you give because they know you know them, they know you listen to them,
Mm.
and you're going to help them get better. You can help them get better.
Yeah, and this is an important distinction that I'm glad you're bringing up, because so much of our conversations now, and even my conversations, are about being your authentic self and bringing your whole self to work. And there's an argument to be made for not bringing your whole self to work and being professional at work. And I've said that before, that you should be your whole self. And now, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, actually, I don't know that you should. And maybe you should be who you need to be for that job, that you make a promise when you take that position and step into that role that you're going to act in a certain way. And a lot of the other parts of you may not align with that. And that's okay. That's not the end of the world. What would you
Yeah.
say to that? I'm still working through this, so I don't have the right
Well,
answer.
one of the things, again, I mentioned that it's important that there's a focus for the coaching. And so I have the advantage in that I have been brought in because people identify me as working with schools on this focus. So I will actually provide initial training. And it is always surprising to me during the training. There's the teacher behavior during a training, and then there's their classroom
Yeah.
behavior. I've got these two teachers, and I in my mind I could picture these two teachers in my mind. It's they ask a question, and it's like, could you repeat it louder? I couldn't hear you. And then you go into their classroom, and they're this whole different person. I mean, they're just a bundle of excitement, and I'm not saying you have to be that, because you could be effective and still be just being effective.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an entertainer. So, whatever, I think your authentic self, you can have an authentic teaching self, possibly, because when I'm working with teachers as a coach, I attempt to be as professional as possible. And when I say professional, focused on what I'm there to
Yeah.
do. because I want to respect the teacher's time. On the other hand, if you know me at all, you'd say, man, that guy is goofy. But I try to, I just for time, I want to respect people's time. It's not that eventually you wouldn't see that side of me, but if we've only got 15 minutes, it's going to be all business, buddy.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. And as I've gotten to know you, I've started to see some of that goofiness also. But what I feel the same way, like I'm here to do a job. And so the way that we interact is to the purpose of that job. Now, you said something in there that was just like a little aside, but I want to drill down to it because many of the, I want to say this in the least offensive way possible, but it's not going to work. So I'm just going to say it in the offensive way. Many coaches have tried to create teachers in their own image and say, what I do is the best, and therefore you should do what I do. And you made that comment that you don't have to be an entertainer and you may be shy and timid in faculty meeting, but loud and boisterous in front of your own students. But the thing is, you can be whatever kind of teacher you need to be that's going to be effective in the classroom. And it's not about your extrovertedness or your introvertedness or how loud you are or anything like that. It's about how effective you are at accomplishing what you're trying to do. So, talk about that a
Yes.
little
Yeah.
bit and how a totally shy person could be an effective teacher or whatever.
Well, a couple stories, and I think you know me well enough now that I've always got a
Yeah.
story. But I was working with a young, I say young, everybody's young to me now, but teacher. She was 28, I think 28 years old. Usually gender's not important, but it's important in this story. Okay. So she's a coach and she's talking to me about issues that she's had. And she says, I'll do model lessons. Well, this young teacher had also been the head cheerleader. Okay. So she's in the class. She goes, I can always make up a rap to go with the content. It's just kind of a, so she's in doing a model lesson. She's modeling how to do something, which I don't like to do model lessons anyway, but that's another topic. So she's in there doing it and she does this rap. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I could see how that works for you, but I ain't gonna rap. I'm just not. So there's that. And the other things that a lot of things that I share with coaches are power phrases. Things that you can say over and over again, but I also have a list of things to never say. And one of the things to never say is, let me tell you how I do it.
Yeah.
Because, who cares how you would do it? Plus, there's an added that may appear because you have some teachers in the back of their mind saying, well, if you were so good, why did you leave the classroom and now why are you a coach? So that's one of the phrases I say, do not ever say, this is how I would do it. Now, if you have an idea, that might work based on how you did it, say, I saw a teacher do this once. What do you think?
That
And
teacher
it's
just
and
happens to be
just
me.
change it. It did, but I didn't tell them. I don't tell them
Yeah.
that. But it's those little things, that make a difference in continuing that professional relationship, whether they're going to listen to you or not.
I learned that phrase. I saw a teacher do this when I was a 29-year-old assistant principal and had to start coaching teachers who were almost double my age. And that was challenging to be sure. And the thing is, like you said, there are effective ways to teach and there are good ways to do things and there are not good ways. And sometimes you can see not good things happening and you don't have to even have a teaching degree to see that. There have been times where parents have complained about something going on in the classroom when they were in there volunteering and they're like,
Yes.
I don't know how to teach. I'm just a volunteer, but this was not good. Like in no way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. And we
Yeah.
need to work on this. And what I also like about that cheerleader story is you can say something like, this is how I did it, but then you have to say, what does that look like for you? What is your interpretation? What is your application of how I did that rather than saying, follow my lead? Like, you can't make it about you should be like me. You have to make it about this is my experience, this is what I've seen, but you are your own person. How does it relate back to you?
Well, and another thing, keeping that same thought going, I'm thinking about junior high teachers. And throughout K-12, the teachers, for the most part, match the behavior of the students at that level. So if I'm working with middle school teachers, we're going to be goofy, because if you're not silly, if you're not there with them, if that's not okay with you, you're going to have big trouble, you know. So there's that. But another part of the answer is that when I'm doing the training, I want to provide methods, I want to provide techniques that work regardless of your personality. In fact, I am a real believer in coaching cycles, and my coaching cycle is different than others. So let me just explain that for a second. First of all, before I explain the coaching cycle, let me just say that we overcomplicate everything. We overcomplicate everything. We take way too long. We don't give enough credit to the teachers to pick stuff up quickly. I like to be sure that when I'm interacting, again, I'm respecting their time and making things work. So my coaching cycle is we'll meet for 45 minutes or so to talk about a lesson that they will be teaching the next day. And during this planning time, I am attempting to model how they would plan a lesson collaboratively. Because to me, the whole idea is to get the teachers not only to be able to plan lessons effectively, but to be able to move to co-teach with somebody and then ultimately in their PLC. And so modeling how to do things together. So when we're doing that, I'm always saying things like, one of the expressions I like, if I have an idea, and I'll say, Jethro, let me tell you my idea. If you like it, smile and say, I like it. If you don't like it, just smile. I want them to have the opportunity, and I keep saying, this is your lesson. This is your lesson. I'm just trying to model how to, and then I will tell them, I'm just going to make bullet points on what we have to do, but I know you have your style of how you're going to present it. I should know that style already before I'm in that room with them because of the other times that I have been in the room to develop this professional relationship. So that's the first part of the coaching cycle. Second part of the coaching cycle is observing the lesson. And one of the things that I tell coaches, and it's funny that nobody's ever told them this before. I said, these teachers, I don't care who they are, I don't care how much experience, I don't care what they told you, they're going to be nervous, they're going to have some anxiety. When you're watching that lesson, first of all, do not bring any sort of device in there. Don't bring a computer, you're going to take notes, okay? But don't bring anything in that's going to detract your seeming attention. The other thing that I tell them, that teacher's going to look at you throughout the lesson. Every time that teacher's looking at you, you better be
That's
smiling.
right.
I don't care what's happening because every time they see you write something, every time they see a look on their face, they're just thinking, oh, what's going on? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Again, regardless who they are, regardless of their experience. So I can't tell you the number of coaches who I've worked with who said, I've never heard that before, but,
Well,
I
and
mean,
Gene, this is where the coaching work that I do on the saboteurs and the sage in your mind, all that's happening there is that they're looking at you, and the saboteur in their mind is saying, this is why the coach is not pleased with what you're doing unless you're smiling. That's it. Like,
yeah,
it is a totally 100% natural thing for them to experience that everybody has. They feel judged by anything that you're doing because you are in there. And that's it. Like, so if you're distracted, they're going to feel judged and that they're not doing good enough. If you have a look on your face that is just like straight faced, they're going to think they're doing something wrong. That is just a natural
yeah,
thing. And unless you do a
yeah,
lot of work to overcome that in yourself, those thoughts and feelings come into your mind all the time. And that's what my coaching focuses on with school leaders is how do you overcome those saboteurs when they come into your mind and how do you not immediately go there?
yeah, yeah. Well, and the reality is, if I'm working with a less experienced teacher, the reality is, even though I am going to stay the entire lesson, one caveat on that, we determine ahead of time how long the lesson should take. So if I'm in watching a first grade lesson, said you should be done at 30 minutes or less. If not, I'm leaving because I got to go
Yeah.
someplace anyway. But I am staying for the entire lesson. And I lost my
That's right.
train of
Let's get
thought.
back to the
So
coach meet, then
okay,
observe, and then what's
okay,
next.
okay. And then the third part is the debrief. And this is another thing that I tell coaches that I'm training is this is not a time This is not a time that you are going to remediate anything because these teachers, there's two things going on. One is a time issue. Okay, we're taking time away. I always respect time. The other thing is, again, there is a level of anxiety, there. When are you least likely to remember something? When you're anxious, when you're
Yeah.
stressed. So, so I tell them, and I say, I make a big deal of it. I say, you know what? We know each other. Between the two of us, we could talk forever. So I'm going to set my timer, and I take my phone out and I set it. I said, we're going to be done in 15 minutes, and that's my commitment to you. And so during that time, the big thing that I want to do during that time is I want to know how the teacher evaluated their own lesson because you're not going to have people in there all the time. What did you think? And I have three questions that I ask. And I said, one is, you know what? I have a very small sample size being in your classroom. How do you think the lesson went? How did the lesson go different than how we planned it? And then third, anything you do different next time. And when I ask those questions, I say, answer them in any order, answer them holistically, however you want to do it. I just want them to start talking about what they thought about the lesson and what they did well,
Hmm.
And the reality is, here's what I was going to say before. That teacher that is so good that we talked about earlier, I probably have a list of 12 little tiny things that teacher might do. But the teacher that's struggling, it might be one big thing that's going to solve a lot of
Yeah.
problems. So,
Gene, this is a really important piece of finding what I always say is the smallest action you can take that'll have the biggest impact and focusing on that thing. And so, if it is a classroom management thing, for example, and if the teacher just had rearranged the classroom so that she could get to different parts of the room easier and quicker, so that she could be walking around the whole entire time, that would solve so many little other problems that just would not be an issue. I observed
yeah,
one classroom one time, and this one sticks out in my mind where the teacher, she had to be at the front of the room. She was using a document camera. And the only way that she could get to these two boys that were goofing off in the back was by going around the long way and then going all the way over to them. And so she had to be yelling at them across the room the entire time. And I was like, this is just not going to work. And
yeah,
if you just stood by them, it would be different. So moving their seats up or rearranging the classroom so she could get there faster, those little things would have solved so many problems that ended up happening later. And that had nothing to do with the actual content of how she was teaching. But
yeah,
that is the kind of thing where a little thing it could make a big difference.
yeah. Well, one of the things that, like I said, when I'm observing a lesson, let's go back to the observation point, I'm making lots of notes. And some of the notes I'm making are I always want to include some quote of the teacher that was powerful. And again, some of it's theatrics, but I'll look at my notes. I said, I wrote this down because I wanted to get it right. Because when you said this, the reaction of the kids, so then she knows I'm paying attention to what's going on. But again, choosing what to talk about with the teachers so I've got a whole list of things. I got half a dozen things to talk about with the teacher. One of the first things I want to talk about is what they want to talk about. So so they're going to bring something up. Oh, you know what? Oh, what would I do differently? Wow. If I think I would do this next time, and I'll say, wow, it's interesting. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Let's talk about that a little bit. And so, is it exactly? It's one of the things. Is it the what you just talked about, that leverage point? Maybe, but guess what? I'll add the leverage point on. I'll add the leverage point on. And so that's where I'm a little bit different. Instead of meeting with a teacher ahead of time and saying, "So, what are your goals? What do you want to work on?" No, no, no. Let's do the lesson. Let's have some context for a conversation. Now you've done the lesson. Now what do you think you want to work on? Okay, let's work on that. So just I think I treat teachers, I have a lot of respect for what they do, and it's hard work. And there are many teachers, especially these days. I mean, after COVID, I don't know what the teacher training program was like, where you were, but teachers got credentialed without ever having been in a classroom, and they just have a whole lot to learn. I just don't think they're ready to answer a question. Well, what do you want to work on? They have no idea what they need to work on. So I want to see them working in context, see how they evaluate what they did. And because many times they're selling themselves short
Yeah.
on something. Say, no, 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 no. I mean, I know we may have planned something in a lesson and the teacher doesn't do it. Maybe it's some activity. And ask them, how you didn't do this? Oh, I just didn't know if the kids were ready. And I tell them, you know what? You could get your kids to do anything.
Hmm.
I've seen you. I've seen how your kids respond. You need to try stuff. You need to have faith in yourself because I see what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I totally agree. And I think that this approach of talking about what they can do and what it looks like and then observing them and then debriefing, I think that's powerful. Is there another step in the coaching cycle or is it those three?
It's those three. When I work, I'm an outsider working, but part of the agreement in the contract with me is that I'm always going to have either an administrator with me and or an instructional coach, because when I'm observing a lesson, I want to calibrate with an administrator or coach what we're seeing. Say, did you see this? Do you notice this? Because sometimes they don't. So that's important. And then have them watch what we just described in the debrief. But what didn't happen in the debrief? How to fix what they need to fix. That's the next step. Usually, when I'm working at a school, another one of the phrases that I'll have when I'm debriefing, I'll pretend to turn on a tape recorder and I say, "Boy, I wish I'd have taped this because I talked to every teacher about this today." And then I'll point to the coach or the administrator and say, "I'm sure you're going to have a little PD, after school PD
Yeah.
on this because everybody could work on it." But the idea is I'm not fixing them there. Because of the anxiety, that timer goes off. Okay, we're going to commit to this. I know you got to get back to your classroom, but these are the things, and we'll check in. And then at another time to do that.
That all makes sense. So, meet, observe, debrief, check in. I think those are all great ways. Those are all essential steps in the coaching cycle. I like that it's simple. I think that's important. I like that you set a timer and that you don't. I mean, literally, you could talk for hours about a single lesson, especially if you are a nerd who loves teaching
Yeah,
and
yeah,
dissecting that. So, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's good to have limits on that. So, the last question that I ask in each of my interviews is, what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like Eugene?
I think the understanding their role is not the coach's role. The role of coaches, in my mind, has developed. It's what principals used to do when they had time. Like what do you do? Well, you're gonna nurture your teachers, you're gonna bring them along, but now you've got 50 people on your staff, and it's just you just can't do it. But so the coach is going to help teachers get better. But what the principal can do is not screw that up, okay, and not get in the way. So, for example, the principal says, as we agreed after looking at our data last year and our end of the year meeting, and this is what we decided our focus is going to be. So Gene is going to be working with everybody. Gene, everybody's going to meet with Gene to talk about these. Notice the principal didn't say you're going to go through coaching and but you're going to meet with Gene. So they can set up a lot of the communication to be the principal sends out an email in keeping with our goals for the year. Gene is going to be coming through classrooms and observing. You do not need to prepare. This is just for Gene to get to know who you are as a teacher and determine the needs of the staff. Something like that, so that it's not, we're trying to fix people, because that's another thing that principals do. They say, okay, Gene, great, you're coaching. You're going to go work with these people. They're on an improvement plan. Mr. Principal, those are your people.
That's right. Yeah.
Those aren't my people. And then the other thing, because the teachers see, oh, you only work with the teachers on improvement plans. Why would you be seeing me? What did the principal tell you?
Yeah.
And so those are a couple things that I think that the principal can do, and let them know that they're part of our system of improvement. We have mentors they help you navigate your first couple years of teaching, but they don't have time to coach you in instruction. They don't have time to do that. The coaches will. You have content area specialists. Okay. The coach can recommend, so that there's a cycle of a system of improvement. There's the PLC, so everything fits together. So that's where I think principals can be transformative, by describing the system of support that exists in almost every school, but doesn't operate as a system.
Yeah. And I like that idea of understanding that you are part of a system, and that there's multiple ways to help someone. It's not all on your shoulders. It's not all on the coach's shoulders. It is everybody working together. And I think if we take that approach, that'll be really powerful. Once again, Dr. Gene Tavernetti, you can go to his website at tesscg.com, and you can listen to his podcast. Excited to have him here on the program. Gene, thanks so much for being part of Transformative Principal today.
Thank you, Jethro. Enjoyed it very much.
This episode was edited by Gage Sanderson.